And everyone that has hunting land, you hope for a good hunt. You hope to see a lot of deer, hope to see a lot of bucks on your land. And, you know, I think it's important that we think about, you know, how many deer can you actually pack on your land? Now, we're going to talk about how you pack the most you can on your land and how you do that. But, you know, we want to do that safely. You know, obviously, if deer are eating you out of house and home, they're eating all your browse, then you have too many deer. What's interesting is if you have ag land, then the area will support more deer. You have more of a complement to your food. If you have food on your land, it lasts a lot longer, and that tells you you're managing your numbers better. And then deer have that complement of ag food at night. When you're in big wilderness areas, you'll be able to fit fewer deer on your land safely because they don't have the complement of quality forage in the area typically, especially if you're surrounded by public land, tracts of big hardwoods, open hardwoods, where you just don't have a lot of daytime deer browse. Then the more you can create on your property, the better. But at the same time, the more you create, the more deer you attract to the land, which is a good thing, but the more food they will eat and consume. And it's something to think about, that balance. There's no correct number. People say, how many deer can I fit on my land safely? I have 80 acres. Well, who knows? You know, it depends on what your neighbors are doing, what region you're in. If you're in ag land, big ag land, medium ag land, if you're up north, if you have winter kill, say UP and Michigan, there's 50% of the fawns die in an average winter. That's approximately 50,000 fawns. So, you know, it really depends where you're at. We're in Kentucky, you could have a monster winter, you're not going to lose deer to winter kill. They'll make it through. So when we're thinking about packing more deer on your land, of course you have to do it safely. And one of the things that I'll talk about that I don't have as a point here is that if you continually have to shoot a whole bunch of does on your land every single year because you're managing poorly and because you have a lot of does on your land, then you really need to make some changes. I hear people, they have 400 acres, 600 acres, and they're shooting 20 does a year, 30 does a year. Well, it's likely because they put too much hunting pressure on the land. It's likely because their habitat features are not put together correctly so that you can walk on the property and off the property without spooking deer. It's likely that they have summer food sources that are attracting huge numbers of does. And in that way, it's pushing off bucks off the land. So there's probably a lot of mismanagement going on, a lot of poor hunting tactics that are being applied to the land. So there's some outside factors to this. But timing of the year, let's start there. The best time of the year. Best time of the year is you want to pack more deer on your land from October to January, from September to December, whatever your season goes. And you want to peak in November, December. And that's kind of goes back to shooting does. If you're attracting a huge number of does on your land in December from the neighborhood, be responsible and reflective and mindful of that you're attracting deer from a mile away because you have the best forage and habitat in December. It appears too many deer on your land because you're eating your pines you planted. Really, that's not a hunting season number. It's not a year-long number. It's not a summer number. And you're actually shooting does and fawns outside of your land, off your property, and up to a mile away, maybe a mile and a half away. And so you're creating a vacuum where you exploit your habitat, you exploit the number of deer, you exploit the neighborhood, and it's a really, poor practice. Does will move, they'll adjust. If they're on your neighbor's land, they'll come on over to your property in October, November, that's okay. Now a little bit different scene in this video right here because we shot point number 2. We had some technical difficulties with the mic. Those are repaired. So we're doing this before we release this. And point number 2 is deer-related stressors. And for fitting more deer on your parcel, it's really interesting because, everyone thinks about hunting pressure, of course. If you have a big open hardwoods, it's 40 acres, you spook deer, they're off the property. They run a quarter mile, half mile. In that open hardwoods, it's just magnified. Those deer run a long ways, and to them, it probably doesn't seem like too much. They're out of that 40 acres in 20 seconds. They're on to the next property, and that could be even a quarter mile away after that. So hunting pressure is one thing. And certainly if the presence of hunting pressure is magnified on a property and pushed, then that property is going to seem a whole lot smaller than it really is, and you want that property to feel larger than it really is. I've been on a lot of 100-acre parcels, 80 acres, 60 acres that really seemed incredibly tiny, because they were so open. You could just see right out the backside. I was on a 160 acre hardwood parcel in Michigan, and literally you can stand on a knoll in the middle of that, just a small little hump, and we could see 155 acres out of 160. There was a little swamp down in the corner that you couldn't see. So what's interesting right in here is we have hunting pressure, and right out here there's a lot of deer pressure and a lot of deer related stressors. And deer don't like the stress of each other, just like they don't like the stress of humans and certainly hunting pressure. And this is a good example. We have deer coming into our cornfield out right here. It's the end of January. They're hitting this really hard. We probably have deer coming from all over. They're hitting this corn very, very hard. And it's kind of cool. I think we'll find some sheds out here. I'm not a big shed hunter. We figure out what our buck patterns are by trail camera, by sign, and especially cameras at the end of the season, summer scouting. But that's where you find out the true patterns of bucks and how you can shoot them. Where they leave a shed really doesn't have much to do with anything other than they're still alive. And we've already found that by sight, hunting, trail cameras. We already know they're alive. We scour that. But out here, these deer want to be separated. Because we haven't worked on the property over here, you can see the hardwoods behind me. And we have some really good trails going down, huge trails, highways going down in the woods. Deer going there, but it's very open. So all the deer that come to this 3.5 acre cornfield, separated by our driveway over here, can't all stay in this woods right behind me. There's just enough deer here, and it's open hardwoods. A lot are coming from across the road, and there's just a huge amount of trails coming across the road, just our dirt road, local road here. They're going back and forth after dark. You have some coming from over here, some coming over here, and we have another really good trail coming from this side. So they're coming in from all angles. And a lot of it largely is because there's no really thick and secure cover adjacent to this, which we are taking care of this winter. We have switchgrass growing behind us in the form of 1.5 acres stretched out. We have terraces. So we'll be able to, with compartmentalizing the type of habitat you have, it goes back to, you can make a 40 acre parcel to deer look like it's 160 acres, or you can make 160 acres look like it's 40. That's a bad thing. And so when we put layers of cuttings with hinge cuttings or just complete cuttings of trees based on the size of the tree and the species, when we add switchgrass screenings, when you add conifer plantings, shrub plantings, early successional growth, whatever it might be, that breaks down and offers various forms of screening cover and separation of deer. Deer separated from hunters, humans, and deer separated from themselves. Whether it's in a food source and they're feeding, and we curve those food plots, we move them around so that deer are not facing directly at each other when they're feeding. There's some separation. Whether you're separating cover, compartmentalizing, you're doing with cuttings or plantings, then you can make deer feel like they're on a lot larger parcel. That reduces overall stress. When you reduce overall stress, then you attract more deer to the parcel, and that's a really good thing. Even when we get into the hunting season, when you have those different forms of compartments, screening, a variety of habitat, it not only helps deer, it helps all forms of wildlife. It gives that edge effect that attracts small game too, but certainly you can fit a whole lot more deer on your parcel during the fall. When you reduce the stress, you know how to manage your hunting pressure, and you know how to manage and facilitate a great property where deer can also be separated from themselves. And then layers. I started talking about layers in the mid-2000s. I had layered deer bedding I talked about, and I remember old PowerPoint projector, and it might even been on a slide for a video projector. I remember back then I had a slide what to layer, and I talked about you have to layer everything. That it was really critical. And Dylan and I were out shooting videos yesterday talking about how to find a buck bed, and part of that was how to create buck bedding, and you really need those layers first around the big food sources. Then you need we talked about hinge cuttings on the inside in that first bedding layer, and then hinge cuttings on the second bedding layer, and then hinge cuttings in the third bedding layer, which is down the bottom. In our case, could be the top in yours, or it could just be across the flat 300 yards in an open flat woods. But you talk about layering everything so that deer that are in one location can't see into the other location. It makes the property feel a lot larger. I've been on a property where it's a half-mile river bottom where there are giant cottonwoods and maples, and you could see all the way across the entire half mile. Client said when deer would run through there, they were across to the other side and through that opening within 10, 15, 20 seconds. And that's an example of no layers, no bedding structure, no separation of deer, incredibly high stress area. You have to have those layers. What do you layer? You layer food plots, switchgrass, cuttings, but you don't want deer to see out of that food plot or into that food plot. That also helps with thermal protection and pulling deer closer to that area, and then maximizing the bedding in the inside and the bedding opportunity. Bedding areas. You want deer to be able to see around in that bedding area based on the balance, 50, 60 yards in those northern areas, 5 yards in southern areas where you have the big open coverless ag areas, but you don't want them to see into the next bedding area. Staging areas. Staging areas are critical. Staging area is that last area where deer feel safe before they enter a food source. Impossible to hunt typically, because if you spook out that, you spook out the entire movement, including the bedding area. I also hunt bedding staging areas. Those are areas where I do hunt, where I can get into an area in the afternoon. We're hunting that this afternoon. We're hunting an area where deer frequently come into, make rubs and scrapes before heading on to food 300 to 400 yards away. And I love that bedding staging area. We're not getting into the bedding area, so we're not spooking deer. It's a transition area. Sometimes you find does and fawns there. I was joking around with Dylan. It gets dark at 5 today, so I said we're going to shoot a buck about 5 after 4. Based on the movements up there, and we're going to see does starting at 5 to 3. So I don't think it'll be that precise, but it's kind of the point. You see does filtering through that, and then you see bucks filtering through that area last. Water holes, habitat features, travel corridors, it all helps to have them layered to the balance of your region. Larger up north, big wilderness, low deer populations, smaller and tighter and more confining in coverless ag regions. And there's a difference. You have to remember, going back to the number of deer, what's appropriate for 80 acres? Well, tell me all your ingredients first, and then on top of habitat, and on top of that, tell me what your neighbors are doing, how many deer in the area. There's so many other factors. There's no cookie cutter land design for anything. So layers, you have to have those layers. Layers, again, could be grasses, hinge cuttings, timber cuttings, dropping, clear cutting, planting conifers. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and it really depends on your resources and your land and habitat. Then finally, efficiency of the land. This is something that I teach, and it's an original concept of mine, along with the bedding layers, but efficiency of the land. And you can't see this down here because I wiped some of it away with snow, but we talk about a 20-acre area, and in this 20-acre area, you can see this large area on the inside. You have stands towards the outside in these X's. Wind is blowing towards the outside, your access is around the outside, and on that 20 acres, maybe you have 14 acres or 12 acres that are dedicated to all deer all the time, and they're contiguous. You don't have to spook deer out of there. It's well screened, so you can get around the property. It's quiet walking, you can get around the property, and then you're not blowing your scent into the wrong location at the wrong time. Here's a 40-acre parcel over here where access is through the middle, and then moving into those X's, into those areas on the outside. And when you hunt in this X, let's say, well, I want to hunt in that X, and it's safe for a west wind because I'm thinking the deer are coming from outside the property, which is a bad thing anyways. But now you just blew out this chunk right here, and you blew out, if you had west winds, this whole area here. If you go access this through the middle, you're blowing out locations half the time, depending on where you're sitting every time. In this 40 acres, you have a whopping 0% of efficiency because there's no acres that you have dedicated as a core location where deer can feel like they can sit in and not see you, hear you, or smell you. The 3 S's, sight, sound, and scent. You have to give those deer that core area where they feel that they can't see you, hear you, or smell you. 20 acres, this property is worth more than that 40 acres because this 20 acres, if you have 12 out of 20 acres dedicated to that core location, which is possible and doable on every property, hit 50% is doable on every single property. Would you believe most properties I go to and hear about online, or I see drawings of properties on social media, I don't comment on those because it's just too long. It takes a few hours to accurately diagnose someone's property, so it's really misleading online and social media. But bottom line is, most of those I see have 0% efficiency, and that'll kill you. It destroys your potential before you even start, and that would be 95% of parcels out there. 5% of parcels are set up correctly. 5% of parcels are set up to pack the most deer that they safely can on their land for the region, the habitat, the resources, the amount of food, amount of cover, everything else. And it is a big combination. You have to do it the right time of the year. If you do it at the wrong time of the year, the summer, you pack a bunch of deer on there, well, those does and fawns hang out into the fall. They push buck bedding away from properties and away from locations. You know, in a coverless ag region, those mature bucks might want to bed 100 to 150 yards, even 75 yards behind those does, away from the food source. And in a wilderness setting, that might be a half mile to 3/4 of a mile. You often have less hunting pressure in those wilderness areas and more space to work with. I enjoyed hunting in the UP of Michigan because I would shoot a lot of bucks out on public land 3/4 of a mile to a mile away from my land in those big buck areas where they're moving to get away from especially the bait piles and in areas that they couldn't relate to till the middle of the night. You have to remove hunting stress, but you have to also remove those deer stressors and make them feel more comfortable relating to each other. I always talk about the mature buck in my Mature Buck Success by Design book. In the intro, I talk about this buck that goes back into his happy spot. He gets away from does, fawns, young bucks, sits back in a bedding area that he's used to, well away from all the movement. All of a sudden, a couple little brats of young bucks come by, and yeah, he could chase them off, but it stresses him out. He wants to find a place to relax, so he moves back a little bit further. He wants to get away from stress. Hunting stress, whatever, it's got to be the right time of the year. In the conclusion of the book, it's been out for long enough, I think since 2015, so it's not like I'm giving away any secrets, but I refer to that old buck as my dad. You know, my dad passed away last year in October 2019, and I refer to him as that old buck where my dad loved to play games with us, be social. He loved to laugh, but at the same time, especially through his 70s and then into when he was early 80s, late 60s, he really enjoyed his time down in the couch in the sunken family room. And if we were playing games and joking around and went into the kitchen right next to the sunken family room, he would go maybe into the office or tell my mom, hey, I'm going to go get a gallon of milk. And she'd say, we already have milk. But he'd go out for a drive. And he liked to just get away and have his alone time. And think about that as a mature buck. Mature bucks are different than doe family groups. Doe family groups are creatures of habit. They're herd creatures. They think and act as a group. A mature buck has gained his age by being a solitary, independent thinker, making choices on his own. When he makes choices on his own, he becomes very, very experienced and wise. Completely different than doe family groups that do the same thing every day and travel a much smaller home range. So you really have to have everything working for you. And you'll find if you're doing all this and you're trying to pack more deer on your land safely at the right time of the year, guess what? You find a balanced, quality herd. And when you have a great herd to hunt, you have great hunting. You can't have one without the other. You have to have a quality hunt. And when you do that, you'll have a quality herd, quality hunt. You'll have that optimum combination. And it doesn't matter if you have 5 or 10 acres or 500 acres. The concepts are all the same. The principles are all the same. I'm not saying a 500-acre parcel is a small one, but you need to manage it the exact same way as you do a 5-acre parcel. And if you follow these tips right here this year, you'll have an enjoyable hunt next year because you get to see a lot of deer, you get to see a healthy buck age structure, whatever it is for your area. You know, some areas a 2-year-old's great. I've had clients that for 7 years before I came, they hadn't seen an antler buck during the daylight. For them, a 2-year-old buck is literally a monster in that area. Might be that it's a 5 or 6-year-old. But to optimize your opportunities, you have to follow these rules right here. And I hope you do, because I love hearing about it. I love hearing about that you found success, hunting success, and you're a successful hunter this fall. Now, as we transition into habitat season, I hope you've had a chance to check out my web class, How to Design Your Whitetail Parcel. It's on my website, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. I have a link in the description, and I hope you can find it, check it out, and enjoy it this year.